Hello, my name is Jamila Gabriel, and I will be presenting on the criticalness of LIS, incorporating critical theory, pedagogy, and action in LIS research, teaching, and practice. So a little about me and my background. I'm currently a fourth-year PhD student in information sciences at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I have close to 21 years experience working and volunteering in libraries, as well as archives and museums. My educational background is in Black Studies, LIS, Museum Studies, and Criticism and Interpretive Theory. It wasn't until starting my doctoral program that I began to recognize the lack of critical theory in the LIS curriculum and discipline, which prompted me to also think retrospectively to my previous educational experiences. I realized that up until that point, my undergraduate coursework in Black Studies had been my only sustained exposure to critical theory. And by critical theory in this instance, I mean that which has emerged out of Black radical tradition. Going forward, I became very intentional about integrating critical theory into my research by taking courses in other disciplines to fill what I perceive as a gap in LIS. For people of color have always theorized, but in forms quite different from the Western form of abstract logic. And I am inclined to say that our theorizing, and I intentionally use the verb rather than the noun, is often in narrative forms, in the stories we create, in riddles and proverbs, in the play with language, because dynamic rather than fixed ideas seem more to our liking. How else have we managed to survive with such spiritedness, the assault on our bodies, social institutions, countries, our very humanity? This quote from Barbara Christian in her article, Race for Theory, which speaks particularly to Black feminist work, exemplifies my perspective on theory, specifically critical theories that address issues of intersectionality and marginalization, and why it has become so important to my work. My personal philosophy on criticality is three-pronged, meaning it should be applied to the following three areas: research, teaching, and practice. Critical theory and research should examine issues through a broad lens that privileges marginalized perspectives and alternative ways of knowing. Critical pedagogy and teaching should share knowledge in a manner that encourages the plurality of paradigms towards creating inclusive learning environments. And critical action should apply theory and pedagogy as a means of resistance against inequities and socially oppressive and dominant systems. Each of these are really just a baseline of how criticality can be applied to LIS scholarship. In the introduction to their book, Critical Theory for Library and Information Science, Exploring the Social from Across the Disciplines, Leckie and Bushman make the case for why critical theory is necessary for LIS. They state that critical theory questions the grounds of claims. It situates human action and structures within culture and history as contingent. It questions categories, and it insists that the critic theorist is neither neutral nor above the social circumstances being theorized. Here they emphasize that critical theory allows us to question and interrogate dominant systems and structures, such as neutrality, a long upheld value of librarianship that many librarians have begun to challenge as a practice that exemplifies white supremacy and oppression. In this quote, Ladson Billings is referring to her conception of culturally relevant pedagogy, which she distinguishes from traditional critical pedagogy as having a strong emphasis on cultural identity. She states, effective pedagogical practice is a theoretical model that not only addresses student achievement, but also helps students to accept and affirm their cultural identity while developing critical perspectives that challenge inequities that schools and other institutions perpetuate. Here she makes the case for pedagogies that operate at the margin, acknowledging the importance of identity and criticality and affirming that critical work is about challenging inequities that exist in these oppressive systems that we find ourselves mired in. Critical action is a component of critical consciousness and is a concept that moves beyond reflection and into the doing of criticality. In his article on recentering critical action, Dimer says that it is collective, sustained, mobilized action to transform inequitable social structures. It's participation in individual or collective action to change, challenge, and contest perceived inequity. And it aims to dismantle oppressive social systems. Like with other critical concepts, the focus on inequity and oppressive systems is inherent. But what I would like to place emphasis on is these characteristics of collectivity and participation that make critical action well suited for and essential to LIS practice. Having immersed myself in critical theory and other critical concepts as an extension of my doctoral studies, what came next for me was contemplation about what criticality and LIS courses would actually look like. This culminated in the creation of a professional development course, which I facilitated via the Library Juice Academy called Critical Concepts in LIS. The objectives listed here provide the scope of the course and the projected outcomes for each participant. But the overall aim was to provide information professionals with a solid introduction to criticality so that they might immediately begin to apply it to their own scholarly work. As is evident from the objectives, the course covered 6 concepts: critical theory, critical pedagogy, critical action, critical consciousness, critical librarianship, and critical information literacy. Our readings showcase various epistemologies such as Black critical thought, Black feminist theory, disability studies, queer theory, feminist theory, and indigenous thought. And our discussions covered a variety of topics related to librarianship, including but not limited to instruction, curriculum, student researchers, archives, programming, and cataloging. We also briefly touched on topics related to decolonization, social justice, and cognitive justice. It is interesting to note that the participants represented different sectors of librarianship from various countries, those being the US, Canada, and Australia. Most worked in academic libraries and were expected to provide instruction in information literacy at their universities. But there were also librarians from cataloging and metadata, museums, music and the arts, as well as public librarians, archivists, and even a retired librarian, not to mention current and recently graduated MLIS students. Everyone expressed why they were taking the course and what they hoped to get out of it. And as some of the feedback suggests here, there was an overwhelming consensus among the participants to learn about and understand critical concepts that they would then apply to their research, teaching, and practice. So what are the benefits of doing critical LIS work? There are many. It enables us to critique hegemonic systems of power and oppression and subordination, makes our scholarship more relevant to the larger academic society by situating us within a broad conversation happening across disciplines, expands the boundaries of what we know and think, opening up new possibilities and avenues of research we might not have considered otherwise, allows us to critically examine our own positionalities of privilege and marginalization, which is essential to doing critical work. And it encourages cognitive justice by recognizing other forms of knowledge and epistemologies emerging from minoritarian thought. Looking forward, I am hoping to continue teaching this professional development course to gain more insight into how the study and application of criticality is beneficial to the LIS profession. But my ultimate goal is to adapt the course for inclusion in MLIS curriculum so that emerging information professionals can enter into the field, having been grounded in ideas, theories, and frameworks that equip them with the tools to identify, critique, and dismantle the oppressive structures that exist within librarianship and other information systems. And that concludes my presentation. I welcome any questions and comments. Thank you.